are live for season 3 of Siren Sundays. Guys, we made it to season 3. Can you believe it? We have a few viewers already tuning in. Hello, Jasmine. Yes, Liddy again.
No.
So we'll just wait a few minutes to get a couple more viewers. Thank you for everyone who tuned in on time. Punctuality is a great virtue to have, so I appreciate it. But yeah, I'm just trying to remember what we were finishing off our conversation about, but I guess I can't even remember at this point.
I think we were talking about Ikigai, I think.
Yes, finding your purpose for life and the meaning of your life, and that being something that makes you happy, helps the world, brings you money, and it was that fourth thing. Yeah. But then you were saying your doers, what did you call your thing again?
My doers code.
Doers code, yeah. And you said that's on your website.
Yes, it's do something, do what you enjoy, do what you're good at or get good at it, do what makes a difference, and do what's right.
Right. Awesome. All right, so we're about a minute and a half in. I know we're going to have an amazing discussion, so I'm going to get the ball rolling. Hello to all the people out in the world there in our big, beautiful ocean. I am Lashanti the host of Siren Sundays, and welcome to season 3. Yes, after all that travel, I am happy to announce that I am back in the Bahamas, guys. I took 31 hours of travel, and I'm still running off of adrenaline because I'm so excited to be here, so excited to be doing season 3 and having the amazing Dr. Ancilleno Davis on my show, who I'm so happy to have here. He's been super involved, even in the comments on the show, giving all that key information whenever we're missing something. So thank you so much for being on my show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. And I'd like to say hi to Los Guapos in Mexico. Leo just said, hola, papi. Hola, Leo. So, yeah.
Awesome. And so today's topic is sustainable conservation in science. Before we get into the topic, Dr. Leno, what can you tell people about yourself in regards to how you got to where you're at in your career with conservation? What are the things you did growing up, the education you took, even some of your work experience that got you to where you're at right now?
So I think some of the key experiences that really got me here. Firstly, in primary school, we used to run around the corner or walk around the corner to my mom's work at the botanical gardens. And that's actually where I first met Eric Carey through my mom. And I also got a lot of interaction with Dr. Jeffrey Lynn, who was the senior vet at the Ministry of Agriculture. And I also met Dr. Maurice Isaacs at that time. And so all of these people around me that were engaged in conservation, they knew that I was into science. I used to get all kinds of science books and stuff like that. And then in the gardens, in the Royal Botanical Gardens, the workers there, we were like walking around and I would always be the one asking them, what's that plant or what's this plant? And they were super patient with me. And so I definitely remember that, having that support growing up. Then when I was in COB, I actually had I had 3 jobs to work to just get my associate's degree. And so I was a chauffeur for Siobhan Bethel, who she gave me a car and everything. And I helped to teach her kids about fish and tutor them and stuff like that. So I really got that tutoring bug. I had the Marilu Tolo Scholarship Award through the Life for Key Foundation. I think they supported it. Speaking of awards, the Beth Scholarship through Brief is available now. So if anyone's listening who has some students, sign up for that. But eventually I finished my associate's degree and I was asking to get some fish out of the botanical gardens. And Eric Carey was like, you need something better to do with your life. Literally, that's exactly what he told me.
That sounds like Eric. That sounds like that.
And so he put me on the Kirtland's project, and that was the first time that I got to interact with these scientists in the field. And they're teaching me about what real science is, and it's not just something that's in a textbook, and it's not some animal like an elephant or kangaroo that you ain't never gonna see in your life, but I'm in the bush with our native plants, our birds, And then I get to go into classrooms. And I remember there was like, this is the Kirtland's project. We're talking about birds. And yeah, we like once in a while we'd have a bird that maybe we didn't get to release it. And so we kept it so it's not flying around in the night. And we'd take it into the classroom, let the kids see it before we release it.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was occasionally I'd find this big snake in the forest, and I'm like, oh, we're doing a presentation tomorrow, so why not take a snake? And they're like, this is a bird project, but snakes always get them. Kids love to see snakes, the danger and excitement. And so, yeah, I really love the science part of it, but also being able to take what I learned and give it to someone else.
Right.
And so now I get to see like I went into class and told Scott Johnson's class about the Kirtland's project back in the day. And so on the Kirtland's project, they called me Grandpa Lino, right? Because I was like the first student to go through the thing. And then there's students like Walter Neely he was just a primary school kid when we were in Tarpon Bay. And he remembers us like letting him hold a pigeon, showing him how to hold it correctly. He taught me how to catch centipedes with my hand. So like
centipede.
Yeah.
Oh, you really out your mind.
Yeah. So
I love nature,
but this is like traditional knowledge that we're not getting because we hear like, oh, centipedes will kill you and stuff like that. But there are people all over the Bahamas doing all kinds of really cool stuff. But yeah, I got a lot of scholarships. I got a lot of people support me along the way.
Right.
Yeah, I see my sister is on. Hey, Nikki. And I know my family is listening in. Mommy was always very supportive. Yeah, I remember that first time going off to school. I had like a little bag, like a carry-on bag and a backpack. And that like I didn't even remember what the guy looked like that gave me the scholarship, Dr. James Wiley. And so I'm like inside an airport in Maryland, and I'm like, I hope this person remembers what I look like. I had met him for like 45 minutes maybe, and he offered me a scholarship, and I was like, yeah. And like the next 2 weeks, I had a visa, my first student visa, and I was off to college on a wing and a prayer. And it was just like some really cool opportunities.
Right. So what does sustainable conservation and science entail? Like when you say that to somebody, or now that we're talking about it on the show, what does that mean when you say these things together?
So sustainability always means you're letting something continue as long as possible. My dog's asking me to go out. Yes, hold on, please. So sustainability just means allowing it to go on as long as possible. And you have social, economic, and environmental issues to deal with. Socially, for sustainable science, you want to teach and allow people to learn and develop the knowledge that's appropriate to our needs for science. Economically, you need the funding. Right now, we have lots of conservationists who don't have a job, or whose organization itself is actually suffering for lack of funding. And then the environment is not just the natural environment, but also things like the political and cultural environments that we have to deal with. I'm gonna let him outside right now. I'll be right back.
Definitely.
Always on
So in just going from some of the notes, some of the things related to social, like you said, is education, language, law, enforcement, and policy. And he's back, so I'll let him continue. Great. I thought that was going to take longer.
Nah, it's just right there. But yeah, so another part of the social elements of conservation and science is like having these standards that are understood and accepted by your community.
Right.
And that includes laws. If we have a law related to the environment, right now we just had the biological resources and traditional knowledge law just was put out for review, and that was really interesting to see that the Department of Environmental Planning and Protection is now publishing these out there asking for review. And scientists like myself, it's not just that we want to have an opinion or be a mouthpiece for it, but then when I reviewed it, I could see that, there were certain groups that maybe were not identified as partnering for
Right.
these laws, or there were ways in which I perceive the law as being vulnerable to exploitation, for political or financial gain, or exploitive of the people in the communities where
And
yeah.
that's a really good thing to talk about, because I think a lot of times, and I think actually, I know a lot of Bahamians actually think that when some of these environmental policies and laws and regulations come into place, it's this whole concept of, oh, it's just those conservationists trying to take things away from us. When really, no, this is all a part of the sustainability, all a part of conservation. And we are using science to make these things happen. We need to know and understand the species that we're trying to protect so that we can then make laws and policies that we know can keep this sustainable. Like when we talk about Nassau grouper, we put a season in place, right? Because we need to know how their life cycle works and how we can keep fishing them sustainably. So that's the conservation, that's the science. And that it's also interesting that you're saying this is the first time you've seen them put it out for review, correct? The department.
Right.
Yeah,
And
which is good, right? Because now
environmental laws,
they're
yeah.
they're vetting it to not just government officials, but it's open to anyone, right? Anyone, including
Right.
scientists and including communities. So that's really good to note. I think a lot of people don't know that that happened. And a lot of times you find that, especially just for people not in conservation, they feel like things just kind of get thrown at them. Or NASA is always telling the other islands what to do when really, the information is not being communicated to them. And we need to figure out better ways of getting that out there. Like, how do we get more people to know, hey, this thing is being under review, let's review it, right?
And this is part of the perspective thing. Right now, in our laws, for a law to be passed and for the acts to be passed, they have to be gazetted,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that means you publish it in the newspaper. You're missing, like, you just like missed tons of Bahamians, right?
Especially in
Um,
my age group.
yeah, and who's gonna go and read that like that? And this is also part of the reason why, through Science and Perspective, I deliberately, like, I downloaded those laws and I put the effort into actually reading them and then
Mm-hmm.
giving my opinion and perspective, but also showing everyone that's on Facebook or Twitter,
Yeah.
this is where I went to download it myself.
Right.
I encourage you to read it
Do the same.
yourself. But for the most part, a lot of people nowadays, it's like you get the information from the mouthpiece of your church, your
Mm-hmm.
political party, your family member, and then you kind of regurgitate that, or you formulate your opinions on that. And I'm really interested in developing a community of people that is more judicious in their reading or consumption of information,
Right.
and making citizens in the Bahamas that are what I think is a good citizen, that holds the government accountable, educates themselves on their rights and their abilities, knows about their own environment, and can come to these decisions or opinions themselves without being kind of like fed.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, definitely. And I think another thing that people probably struggle with, and I'll admit that myself even struggles with, when it comes to these environmental laws. Yes, I went to school and I studied marine biology, but when it comes to reading laws and policies, the language that's used is also very hard to, honestly, to read and understand. And I think it's really important for people like yourself who understand this to do what you did, like post it somewhere and explain what this is saying and what this means so that people can then look at it and then form their own opinions, whether it be that they agree with your points or they say, actually, no, what you said didn't make sense and this is what I think. And then it can begin that dialogue with people who are not only conservationists, but straight down through the community. But what are some of the ways that you think we can get the information out there better? Because I know we talked about this education part of it, and it's not happening formally in schools. But what, in your opinion, would be the best way to start getting, this conservation information out to get more people involved? Do we just start, holding meetings? Do we start like a book club kind of thing? Like, how can we make this happen?
So by the time you get to, you know, 12th grade in school, the subject that you're probably the best at is reading and writing. You know why? Because you use that in every class.
You do.
You like, even for a math class, you have to read the questions.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what if inside your math class you had your students, hey, this is the average amount of fish that a Bahamian fishing vessel brings in.
Right.
This is how far they have to travel, and this is the fuel efficiency of their boat. Now you have a math question that's actually pertinent to this student, and you're going to get that one student who's like, I don't need math, I'm going to be a fisherman. But now you could be a sustainable fisherman that's actually making money and knows how much to charge for the fish that you catch.
Exactly.
And a lot of teachers, I think, aren't adapting their lessons to incorporate our Bahamian wildlife, our Bahamian culture, and even things like laws and religion. And when you take religious studies in the Bahamas, it's really Christian studies or Catholic studies if you went to St. Augustine's College, right? Like some people.
Oh boy, we're
Right?
not starting that. Yes, some people.
But it's definitely interesting, and I went to SAC, everyone, so you know.
Typical SAC person, you have to. They will always let them know that you went to SAC.
I mean, it's full disclosure. It's full disclosure. So it's like you can integrate science into everything.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know that the diversity statistics that we use all through biology,
Right.
that was originally applied to words inside documents. So using that to analyze how varied the vocabulary was inside a document. And then a lot of scientists, they get stuck in this mindset where you can only use these biological principles for animals. And in my dissertation, I used it for tourists and citizen scientists and human beings that were doing different things. And so when you like kind of step out of that and understand that you can adapt things, I think it makes it a lot better. And that's what I think I would like to see more of. And
Mm-hmm.
if you want me to help you adapt it inside your class, give me a shout. It's not here.
Yeah, I think it's important. Just it's one of those things where, just like if you want to throw some sciencey terms in this, just like species have to evolve to adapt to their environment, we really have to start evolving our education system and adapting to the new ways that students can digest information. Like you said, a lot of people do. I love how the Sackers are in the comments going. So a lot
I guess.
A lot of people go to school and are discouraged because it is a lot of reading and writing. And when you get things like these real world examples that you talked about, like I find that you will find somebody who's not very good in math, but when you put it in real terms, like when it's their money, now you're talking about their money, they will be able to tell you interest rate and all sort of stuff because it's now something relatable. And it's like, it's a different learning style for them. They need that pragmatic, those like real practical examples to make that connection. And if you don't make those connections with things, science is often not connected to how these things are created. So I think a lot of people, again, like I was saying, they think that when conservation projects happen, they don't understand all the science that goes into that before that decision is made, all the research and all of the questions and the consultations that happen before these things kind of pop up out of nowhere. So we really do, just as conservationists in the Bahamas, we have to get a lot better at communicating this information so that we can have like this constant flow of engagement with the public.
Yeah,
we just took a tangent, but
well, no, it's cool that you like talk about these, like that we talk about these different students and who's thinking about it, right?
mm-hmm.
Inside our political arena, inside that House of Parliament, it's like everyone in there is a lawyer, and I'm like, how can they be drafting laws or enacting laws when they don't actually understand, and making deals about where the protected areas are, or who can do this type of thing, or the next, and they haven't been swimming on these coral reefs, and they've never been on a fishing boat, or they've never seen the Teesal Bank, and these things are really sensitive issues. um, Mallory in the comments says we need a Freedom of Information Act, and that's, I think that's a really key element of sustainability in science.
Right.
Science, you need to have information that people can use to make decisions,
Right.
or that people can use to assess what's going on. And if we don't really have the information from the past to say this is what was allowed at this point in time on this location, and then we're here 10 years later and we say, oh, that's the result of that happening. That was really good, or that was really bad.
Right.
Right? We have data from the Exuma Keys Land and Sea Park that's managed by the Bahamas National Trust.
Right.
We know how great that worked for the grouper and fish inside there. But we also now recognize that the conch inside there, they're getting old because there's not new conch coming in. So you have a great romantic honeymoon location for conch, but then their babies grow up and move somewhere else. So now we know that we need to have more of these protected areas around the country. Having a Freedom of Information Act, I think, would be really good as well, because then we could have students get that information in school. Imagine if you were in 8th grade and for your BJC or whatever, you had to download or gain access to information that you have a right to as a citizen, and then analyze that or assess that for your BJC in conservation or social studies. Can you imagine the difference that that would make for students to see that?
I would be happy that I don't have to do it.
But if you had a true Freedom of Information Act, that would be, it would make it easy.
Yeah.
And it would be a part, we'd have a lot more argumentative people, but who are more informed about what they're talking about as well, I think.
Right. And just to go back a bit to, I think, I can't remember which point you had made this, but it made me think of this whole concept of, and I'm sure you've dealt with this, when, like you said, when we have something that's in place and 10 years go by and we now assess it, a lot of times what also is left out is when data is not like properly collected and analyzed, this conservation, right, that we've just done, we find out it isn't sustainable. We don't have the evidence, but to the, to just someone who's on the ground, they may think, oh, well, but we've been doing it this way for decades. Why are you now trying to change it? But it's like, no, because science can predict, right? Science can tell you, hey, what you're doing right now, even though it seemed like it was sustainable before, there are different factors coming into play. And I think that's something important to kind of note. And if you could just dive a bit into that, just how important it is to just have that citizen science aspect. Like when fishermen are fishing and they're collecting these fish, it's really important to know the weight and the length and the size of these fish, because there may be small, increments of decrease over time that you don't really notice unless you look at a larger scale, you look at a bigger picture. And it's not just something that's kind of getting pulled out of the air. It's really the science that's informing us to say, well, listen, this is the trend, right? Trends. We see this is what's been happening, and this is what we think will happen if we continue this way. This is why we need to implement a season or increase the size limit for catching. So, yeah, so sorry, I'm like rambling, but right. You just talk a bit about how science changes, things change.
Yeah, there are three things that I want to talk about here that tie in data to the effects and our current situation. Firstly, like birds. I was at a Birds Caribbean regional meeting in 2009, and the researchers, in their mind, these are foreign researchers that visit the Bahamas for short periods of time, and they in their minds, piping plovers were super hard to find, and like nobody knows where they are. And I remember some guy getting up and he's like, oh, it's a bunch of them over there on that beach.
Which happens, right?
Right. And so now then after that, they return, and they return again and again. And now they're interacting with local people and getting this traditional knowledge that can change science and change it significantly and very quickly. Because in the past, all the researchers, they come down during their US school vacation.
Yep.
They come down during their US Christmas break and spring break, and they're introduced to one hotel that they know to be a safe hotel. They stay there every year. And they're researchers that had been visiting the Bahamas since before we were independent. So imagine a class visiting your country, and this class and this same curriculum is older than your nation,
Right.
telling their students about your nation. And then they're publishing and telling you what your nation is like after 2 weeks in our country a year. That's kind of biased science. And now we have the opportunity where like Eric Carey and the Bahamas National Trust, the Nature Conservancy, and the U.S. Forest Service, they said, you know what? What if we got Bahamian students? What if we live here and not where we teach them the science, but then they're going to be here and they're going to perpetuate that. And so now you have myself, you have Zico McKinsey, Ingeria Miller, Scott Johnson, and it's I'm getting goosebumps now, but like
it's
when
powerful.
It's powerful when you talk about snakes. If you say anything about snakes in the Bahamas, they can say, oh, the Rasta guy with the snakes, right? From
Rasta Noir.
Yeah, he cut his locks now, so that for his public persona, he got to build that back up a little bit. But and people see me inside the mall and they say like, oh, you the dude, the science dude from TV, right? from Facebook or whatever, right? And I think that's really super cool that we have this internal science community now. Like Dr.
I love it.
Yeah, it's amazing. Then
like you think Crystal, like the minute you see Crystal, plastic pollution. Yeah. Like, and then you see Mark Daniels, plants. All you see is plants. And I love that. And I think it's so important to have iconic Bahamian scientists to inspire younger Bahamians to see that, you know, it's not out of their reach. It's not just Bill Nye the Science Guy on TV, because that's what I grew up watching. And, you know, Bill Nye is great, but here it is, a non-Bahamian white male on TV doing science that I think is cool, but I don't have anyone I can relate to. But I definitely, and I think we talked about it in a couple of episodes ago, I think with Eric, when we were saying it's so nice to have this, like you said, the Scott Johnsons and the Ancilleno Davises and these people who kids are now starting to see on Facebook, posting the videos, and they have access to this information, and you learn amazing things. And I love it. I honestly, and like you said, I'm enjoying this community that we are building, especially of the Mer people. So I'm going to be a little biased. Shout out to the Mer people. Sorry, Scott and Mark, but, you know, marine is where it's at. But, of course, in the Bahamas, you know, marine and terrestrial, they intermingle very closely. So I don't even think you can fully say, you know, separate terrestrial and marine conservation. It's always hand in hand. So, which is probably another thing.
That's one of the things that really excites me about my work, because I'm both marine and terrestrial. It's opened a lot of opportunities for me. We were talking about the sustainability and science in these different areas. The next one that I wanted to talk about is fishing. So I'm always inside these conversations, and you know what they say about fish, there's always more fish in the sea. And so
fish in the sea.
Right, there's plenty of fish in the sea. There's always more fish in the sea. I always have to tell people, not all those fish could eat, right? And you also say, there's more fish in the sea, but how far do you have to go to get it? And this is one of the key things that with fisheries data, if we had good fisheries data, we can say how many fishermen are in the industry.
Yeah.
How many fish are they bringing back per trip? How long are they out on that boat? How big is that boat that they're on?
I was going to say, and what equipment are they using to find and catch these fish?
Right. Yeah. And so, like, the guys are, man, my grandfather, he used to go out and bring back a boat full of fish every week. I say, you know, your grandfather was sculling that little dingy boat, right?
Exactly.
He
Hand
was,
line.
yeah, hand line sculling a dingy boat. And I've seen guys, Santana in Exuma. We went there for, I think, my wife's birthday, like back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And she calls her son after you order your food. She calls her son, and dude comes walking out of the ocean with lobster in his hand, and you like that's a totally different
That's fresh.
experience that you ever gonna get anywhere else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it's like most people don't have this perspective because their interaction with conch, grouper, lobster, it's I pay you and you put it on my plate. It's
Right.
already chopped up, so I don't. A
You don't
lot of
even
people
know how much baby conch that
see the face.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they don't even see the face on the organism that they're eating, right? They
Yeah, and I
don't
think
know that it's grouper because it might be
right.
something else.
Yeah, and it's
Some
important to think here. This is another thing, right? Like if the average person, the consumer, doesn't understand the science that's going behind, some of the things that we say, and you said, all they're seeing is the fish is coming in, the fish is still coming there, but you don't understand the fact that, and someone told me this like a couple of years ago, and it blew my mind when it actually resonated. The way we fish now is adapted from war weapons. Like the technology that is being used to fish is technology that was developed for war. Sonar to find these giant schools of fish miles and miles out, where before it was, your grandfather in the little dinghy boat with a hand line, only maybe going a mile out, but people are going further to get fish, and they're able to go further because they have these ingers and sonar, and that's detrimental to the environment. And so just because you see this still coming in, and then you hear scientists saying something, it looks like a contradiction almost. It almost looks like the tree huggers or I get the reef huggers, which don't hug reefs, by the way, guys. But it almost just looks like we're just saying one thing when really a whole nother thing is happening. And that's why kind of, like you said, the education and the social and the economic, all of this needs to tie in together, because if we're not in sync with all of this, it almost just looks like everybody's tooting a different horn and you can't even figure out who's telling the
right.
truth. So that's just, I just felt like that was perfect to interject there when you said they're not even seeing, all they see is the cut up conch already, or the tail of the snapper, or they see two little snapper tail on there, but they're not understanding how these fishermen have to work to get it. Demand is what's driving it. And that's why, like when we said, it's grouper season, it's closed season. Don't even, if you see someone selling grouper, don't buy it, because then now you're encouraging it. Encourage them to go and get something else. Like, ask for lionfish right now. It's an invasive species. It tastes pretty good. And you're also helping the environment, and you're giving grouper time to, do their thing, right?
and the lionfish eat the babies of all these other fish. So if you eat the lionfish, then you don't have that pressure on your grouper. So they ain't eating the grouper off of your plate. So that's another reason to do it. We're talking about the sustainability of these species, and there's
Right.
a fish thing. Conch, if you think a conch takes 4 years to grow old enough, right?
And if that, some will take longer.
Some take longer, and that's just for them to get the opportunity to be interested in maybe finding a mate and having some babies.
Mm-hmm.
That's not saying that they're guaranteed to have babies because they're so far apart. You ever see conch walk?
These hop,
right? Yeah, you take 2 days to go and reach up to this next conch, and then you find out it's the same gender as you. That ain't even gonna work. You know what I mean?
what a waste of time.
Yeah. But what people don't understand is because they take 4 years to grow up, you can actually destroy the conch fishery this year, and we don't know until 2024.
Exactly.
So now, next year, you are fishing inside an overexploited resource. So now you can't make enough to off the conch. So now you gotta hit something else and hit something else, and it cascades down until you already ruin everything.
Right.
Nobody has a conch, So
and that's why. And like I said, you said 4 years, but it's like 5 to 7 years. And then you probably remember the number. Conch only reproduce when they're in large groups. They will not, if you take a male and a female conch, they're not going to reproduce unless there are a bunch of other male and females. And I'm not sure, do you have the numbers on that? I can't remember.
It has to be like 50 something per hectare or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we're like way below that now. And yeah, I see dudes them cracking out these baby conch all the time. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And then I asked them, I say, you know, what if we like right now, today, we just started, you know, wait until everybody have 2 babies. And then, you know, yeah.
We could track that.
Then you could die, right? No, I'm saying like for human beings. After every human has 2 babies, then you could die.
You could go dead.
What if you start going and fishing inside the primary schools and the high schools and just culling all these little children? Yeah. Eventually, you ain't gonna have no more Bahamians, right? That's what we're doing to the conch and fish populations.
See, and that's beautiful. The way you just said it like that, and I think that resonates so well with people. And this is the way we have to start communicating the science to create this sustainable conservation. Of course, I'm going to keep plugging in this title wherever I can, right?
Yeah, and the last example that I want to bring up is tourism. If it's one thing we have numbers on, it's tourism.
Yeah. Like in all kinds of numbers.
Right. We know how many people came by plane, boat, how much they paid in customs, and
if they went diving, if they went fishing, you know, if they went to the casino, how many days we have really good data on tourism.
Like Stuart Cove, they can tell you how many people they had to refund money when there was an oil slick and all the people got covered in oil, right? You have during the different hurricanes, you have a hotel that can say, these are the people that canceled their reservation because they saw a hurricane come in.
Right.
They can say, these are the people that were scheduled to leave, but couldn't leave because a hurricane came through. So then you can say, if there's a hurricane, a major hurricane in the Bahamas, there's actually this cool, well, for me, it's interesting data. It's not cool. It's interesting, right?
It's interesting.
But you see around the halo of time around a hurricane, there are people that are speculating like, oh, this hurricane is going to be bad. I'm not coming to the Bahamas anymore. So they pull out. Then there's the people that they dip out early. And you can see this mass exodus.
Yeah.
And then when it's really, really bad, you get disaster tourism. So I looked at that on my in my dissertation. This is one of the questions that I was looking at. And like when Haiti had the earthquake,
right?
Science, this weird thing, a bunch of American disaster tourists came down to help. But when they weren't building houses, they were out bird watching because they never got to go bird watching in Haiti. And you don't really think about this, but you can see human behavior in all of these things and the fear. And how long does our economy quiet down when there's a hurricane, when there's a major hurricane?
A lot.
Right.
Liquor sales go up though.
Yeah, liquor sales go up, but that's also something that you can talk about, and you can use science to determine these social impacts. So how long after the hurricane or the major damage can the government actually support people
financially?
Our national insurance is paying out this money, but if you look at the numbers, that's a finite resource.
Right.
Right.
And to flip that, it also is a way for people to understand, hey, if a hurricane is coming, I need to have X amount of money because I need to potentially last X amount of time. And then that gives better financial planning, right, for people. And I think that's something that Bahamians struggle with. We need better financial literacy. And it's amazing how, like you're saying, this science can actually contribute to that. Like we can now start thinking about our economy in a different way, just simply off of scientific data that we can collect on tourism, on hurricanes, on all of these different things, and how for the Bahamas it just intertwines, you know?
And one of the things, so I do a presentation called Seeing Sustainability that I do for organizations and, school groups, businesses. and I also do these consultations. And one of the things that I'm really getting people to think about now
Mhm.
is, do you have your hurricane buffer? Because right now, the hurricane that hit Abaco and Grand Bahama,
Yeah.
Hurricane Dorian, that's, once every 10 years, once every 11 years, something like that, passes through the Bahamas, and it doesn't hit the same island every time. But when it's your turn, it's your turn. And does your business have the ability to survive that? How long can you go and pay your employees, 50% or 60% of their salary, and survive, and then get back up and running again?
Right.
And for a government, how long can you do that? And this is data that we can get. And the science says that these storms are going to be more frequent and more powerful. So we need to be thinking, how often can our country take a 6 month hit to
Yeah.
tourism? How, and where is our resources? So Nassau New Providence kind of small, right? So when the hurricanes come up to the right or the left, we duck out. But right now, with our economy like it is, if our turn is next,
Yeah.
we ought to look bad.
I
And
know.
and and we can look at the tourism data and see what each of these storms have meant in the past and what it means in the future. And it's the same with the oil spills. So you look at oil inside the Gulf of Mexico and all of those places that got hit really hard, and how long did they take to just find some sense of normalcy? How long does it take to recover? How long does it take to clean up?
Do you
Um,
do you know how long it took them?
it doesn't, no one has cleaned up an oil spill. So the
Okay.
Exxon Valdez, that was more than 30 years ago, and they still have oil. You dig down just under a few pebbles and there's oil still there in the bedrock, right,
Mm.
in the seabed.
Yeah.
You have the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. All those coastal states in the US, they are not cleaned up, and people are using these references like BP. They settled in court for like 6 point something $billion, and that's like half of our GDP, and that's like not even like what we do for tourism.
Mm.
So you think about that, like if you give less than we make from tourism in one shot and say, oh yeah, sorry about that. But then it takes 30 something years to recover. What does that mean? And this isn't even talking about health effects. So the cancer rates, the medical issues that we have. And when Hurricane Dorian hit, I was worried about my friends and family that were on Abaco, and I lived there for a few years studying the parrots.
Yeah.
And I was really concerned trying to find my friends and stuff if they were okay. And I
Right.
helped, like, even the data, the GIS data. I collaborated with Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and I think we coordinated 104 scientists to
Mm.
map everything that was in Grand Bahama and Abaco immediately before the storm.
Right.
And being able to WhatsApp to Coast Guard and to the office of the Prime Minister and say, hey, there are 50 people that say that they're here, and a helicopter could land on this area that we've identified that doesn't have water on it. Like, being able to do that with science and mapping, and it was really interesting work. But I don't want to have to do that last minute.
Right.
We should have this data all the time for our entire country. And if we could do that, I think we did it in like 4 days after for Hurricane Dorian. Once we coordinated it, there's no reason that we can't map the whole Bahamas in the next year or so.
Right. And how important do you think it is for us to do some like spatial mapping and planning? And then how equipped are we to do that? Like how many people do we have trained in? I know we have the Bingus, the what is
Bahamas
Bahamas.
National Geographic Information System Center.
Right.
There's a lot of things that come into it. The cost. Um, right now, there's a lot of open source things that you can do or methods that you can use. A lot of the information, this satellite information, you have someone flying a satellite around the world, and they just taking pictures all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
there's images of the whole Earth every 24 hours.
Yeah.
And so when you think about it like that, all that data is out there. We're a sovereign nation. So you can't just be taking pictures of our country all the time, right? Let us use it.
Yeah.
But then also like the proprietary software to manipulate and coordinate this data, that can be really expensive. But you have places out there that if you can say, hey, um, GIS Max, whatever this software is called, we'll make you the official GIS software of the country, and all of our students have to learn it. That's a major market, but they don't have that like that right now. I really love that cup, by the way. So that's one cost thing, but then the amount of benefit that you can get from it. Imagine if you had a GIS map of the whole country that included topography. We knew where all the police stations, fire stations, schools, churches, medical centers, all of that are, all of those things are. Then when you talk about you're going to run for our constituency, I want to know that my constituency is supported in that we have enough police for the population, because some areas they have a really high ratio of police to citizens, and in other areas it's very low because of population density, and it's something for
Yeah.
medical. So you might have 1,000 people per doctor inside the South Beach clinic, but then you go to like the Elizabeth Estates clinic and maybe you only have 500 people per doctor.
Right.
And now these issues of where people have to travel two constituencies over for medical care
Yeah.
to see a public doctor. And then you have the issue where Hurricane Dorian comes and sits on Grand Bahama, so the only other major hospital in the country is basically erased. And now you have people having to come over to New Providence, and you also like you map these numbers out, and 400 beds in the hospital for the country.
Yeah.
And they're all on one little island that's only 21 by 7.
Yeah.
Um,
So we do have the question: what ministry does this come under? I was thinking, is it Works, Ministry of Works?
the
mapping of the town planning.
Yes, so that's Ministry of Environment and Housing, and I think Bingus goes under them. But
Okay.
really, when you have something like freedom of information or the data center, like these things should be more broad, and really you should have a GIS expert that's inside the Public Hospitals Authority, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Environment, Youth Sports and Culture. Where are all of your stadiums and your fields and stuff like that? If one gets flooded out, if something happens, if you need to like move a situation, like how do you do that, right? And these are things that we can think about like really broadly, even with social services. You can talk about where are more children like starving, where are more where's there more homelessness, drug abuse or addiction, and that way you could tie that in with the Ministry of National Security or whatever, and say, let's deal with this while the kids are young, so they don't become the criminals that you have to deal with later.
Right.
And so I think all the ministries can use more geospatial analysis and science, of course.
Yeah. What is it? We all need a little more science and a lot more perspective.
Yeah, and this, I think what I really love about the work that I've been doing is that I get to be a part of these meetings and these committees and groups that are talking about these things, like the Sustainable Development Committee, the Technical Committee on Standards for Environmental Protection and Management. Anyone can join these committees. You
Right.
just have to have the interest and the time, and you have to be able to read, right? And
Yeah.
so, but inside the when we started the Technical Committee on Environmental Planning and Management,
Hmm.
we had, after one meeting, everyone from like different oil companies and gas companies, they were represented like almost right away.
Oh,
Like the
wow.
industries were represented, but we struggled to find the time as conservationists or scientists or NGO groups to find someone within our group that we could have come and represent us on those things.
Right.
But like anyone can come and represent themselves, their church group. Maybe you have a church on the ocean and you don't want it to get flooded out. I
Yeah.
don't, yeah.
And in the notes you talked about if you want to start a technical committee to make standards appropriate for your field or industry, the BBSQ, what does that stand for?
The Bahamas Bureau of Science of Standards and Quality. So
Right.
if you pull into the gas station on that fuel meter, you have a little sticker that says that the BBSQ check that, right?
Hmm.
So having a standard doesn't take a side.
Right.
So so standards don't say something is too long or too short, but you can say this is how you measure something properly,
Right.
right? And you do have some standards that says this is too much oil pollution. This is too much of this chemical in the environment.
Hmm.
This is how much chemical is normally in the environment, and this is how you measure it.
Right.
And then after that, once you have those standards in place, when I, as a scientist, I'm going to do an environmental impact assessment, I
Right.
can say I am using these standards that were outlined like this, and I'm qualified to use these standards.
Right.
Then we go to the legal proceedings. A lot of people don't know that as soon as you walk into there and that lawyer, like, so who are you?
Yeah.
Why should we listen to you? Like
Right.
these numbers don't mean anything.
Hmm.
And then you have to say, yeah, this is what these numbers mean, and this is why they were
And this is
developed
what
like
it's
that.
backed from. Like it, yeah. So
Mhm.
and we do have a question before we continue on that. Most of the publications out there about the Bahamas are often from foreign institutions. Why aren't local organizations and NGOs leading this? What's hindering this? And is it because of lack of support from the powers that be?
So traditionally, we do have an issue of colonialism in science. So what that means is that these powers, like the ruling class, those who used to own us, like Britain,
Well,
etc.
conservation started off as a colonialist concept, but that's for another episode of Siren Sundays.
Yeah. But so, for example, our conservation, like we now have a forestry act, and we're trying to protect all of our trees and be able to use them for Bahamians to gain from that, right?
Right.
But before that forestry act, you have, the land is partitioned in certain ways and sold and used for different things.
Right.
And right before independence, the British government basically clear cut the whole Bahamas and sold all the wood. And when you think about how that works conservation wise, and it's similar to the way science has worked, you
Mhm.
had people that were very disconnected from the way regular Bahamians live, and they make decisions and choices for how science is conducted. And like I said, they have very little understanding of what you do daily, like how often you have to go to the food store, how far the food store is, how to make peas and rice. But then they saying that oh, Bahamians are this or Bahamians are that. The Bahamian environment is this and that, and they've only been here for a certain amount of time.
Right.
So that's how it's been in the past. But now most of the research that I've been reading, it's actually in collaboration with local NGOs or regional NGOs that have Bahamians or local scientists on that research, conducting that research and engaged with it.
Good.
And this is from my reading as a professional scientist. But again, that's not necessarily what you're going to see in the media. And you have to remember there are two different, there are different things. There's what you intended to do. There's the actual impact of what you did. And there's the perception of what you did. So those can be three totally different things. And when it comes to science, you have an intent of what you're trying to assess or analyze. Then the data or the information that you actually get, if you had some biases or if you didn't involve Bahamian people, you're gonna really bias the data that you get. Right. And then the effect that you get, you're not gonna be able to conserve or protect your environment properly. And same, Will is asking also, why can't we lead? Sure, we are leading. Lashanti is doing an excellent job right now, giving voice to what us as scientists are doing. Right. I myself, I run Science and Perspective, and I talk about these different issues, but I'm the chair of the Technical Committee on Environmental Protection and Management. I sit on the National Wildlife Trade and Conservation Advisory Committee, and that deals with like people smuggling our species, taking them out of our country, what needs to be protected and stuff like that. Right. The Sustainable Development Goals Committee, and all of these things I am not doing by myself. Right. There's 10 to 30 other people, conservationists in those conservation conversations.
Yeah. Right. And that's, I want to coin that term for this show, conversations and conservation conversations. But what I was going to say is, to Will's question, why can't we lead? I almost want to take that and reframe it to people watching. Why can't you lead? I think when it comes to conservation leadership in the Bahamas, I feel like there's sometimes, and I say sometimes because there are people that I see do have the initiative and are making it away. And I again use Crystal Ambrose as an example. She saw a problem and she didn't keep asking, like, hey, how can someone do this? No, she did what she could, and now look at what she's accomplished. She helped get the plastic ban for single-use plastics across the nation. One person did that because they took the initiative and they decided to be the leader. They decided to lead something, and not by herself. You cannot lead and know people, right? I was going to say you can't not lead nobody.
Yeah,
and like you and I were talking about just before we went live, it's all about finding your niche, right? If you feel so passionate and so driven about an issue that you're seeing in your community, whether it be something conservation related, something social, economic, if you feel so passionate about it, try to start the initiative. Try to take that passion, back that up, and lead something, and start off small. Yeah, just do it. This is who said. Yeah, I'm gonna put that up. Just do it. Just do it. And I love saying it's always small steps to a big change. When I started this platform, it was literally just me. I did a panel with the Sustainable Lifestyle Group, and then they said, hey, well, do you want to do this platform? And I said, sure. Well, I'm a little anxious about it, and it evolves and it grows. And that's what finding your purpose is about. It always starts as this small push. It's almost like a little pin, and you feel it, right? And you know it's there, and you want to do something. And the only way that prick's going to stop hurting is when you actively start trying to take it out and figure out, well, what is this? And eventually it blossom, right? Like caterpillars, it hurts for them. Or actually spiny lobster, I'm going to use them as an example. And then I know I'm like rambling now, but I talked about this in season 2 when I had Michael Bullock on the show. I always try to say, remember the spiny lobster. When you start feeling uncomfortable about something and you want a change to happen, you have to go through that discomfort to get to that level of comfort. The spiny lobster is very uncomfortable in its shell when it's time to shed it. And it has to break through that and then regrow its new shell to get comfortable. So just do it. Take the initiative, guys.
And this is one of the things that Beings is Bahamians educated in natural and geospatial sciences.
Oh, I should drop them.
And around 2009, 2010, I was working for the Nature Conservancy and trying to find Bahamian scientists that were introduced in the Marine and also wanted to be and were also like capable scuba divers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like pulling teeth because the ones that had gone through these excellent programs like the best award scholarship, and remember to check out BESS, Bahamas Environment Student Scholar Award,
Yeah.
and that's on the brief website. But beings on Facebook, they told me that no one had the money to do it. None of the organizations had the money to do it. None of them had the time or the personnel. And I was really frustrated and I was annoyed, and I knew that we all needed it. And so I went and started it on Facebook I seeded it with 50 friends, and I kind of governed the culture of it. Like there's no cussing. We share like career opportunities, scholarship opportunities, ask and answer science questions. And now it's like, I think it's 1,200 or 1,300 members.
Yeah, you're at, I think, 1.2K.
Yeah, and so like being able to see that grow as something that's for free on Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
and it just took someone to start it, and now every NGO in
Yeah.
the Bahamas that deals with conservation is represented in there.
Yep.
And you have students and teachers from the entire country and around the world that are offering scholarships, that are taking advantage of scholarships. I remember like a year after we did that, we got the first student got a scholarship to go to NASA. And you're like, a Bahamian going to an aerospace scholarship?
Mm-hmm.
That would not have happened if we didn't jump off. But so Will, I know you could find me. So reach out if you want to get some more experience in whatever. We could talk. If you want
Find
to
him.
support
Use him.
someone else, yeah. If you want to support someone else, that's also really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just reach out, and everyone can find me. I'm the easiest person to find. If you could spell my name, you can find me.
Definitely. And we are over the hour, but this was definitely a beautiful conversation, a great way to kick off the season. Very inspiring, very motivational. Do you have any final thoughts for our audience before we sign off for the evening?
Sustainability in science and conservation is really the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
But core to that is education.
Right.
And so teach someone else. But first, you have to teach yourself. So definitely educate yourself, reach out to us, and let us get you in touch with who can tell you about your environment more.
Yeah.
You can get involved, and then educate the people around you, especially your ministers of parliament and your parliamentary representatives. Tell people about the issues that you have in your environment and that affect your future, our islands, and our future. Google that. Our islands, our future.
Our future. Definitely. So thank you again, Dr. Davis. Sorry we can't get to the other questions, but we will most likely have him back. I'm sure a lot of you would love to see him again. Please, guys, remember, we are connected to nature. And as our country are a chain of beautiful islands, it is not the ocean that disconnects us. It's what connects us to each other and to the environment. Thank you for tuning in to Siren Sundays, episode 1 of season 3. I look forward to seeing you guys for the rest of this time here in the beautiful Bahamas. So see you in 2 weeks for our next episode. We will be having Crystal Ambrose talking about the Bahamas plastic movement and her journey through conservation. And I'm very excited for that episode. I hope you guys are too. And I will be seeing you.
Thanks, everybody.